everybody. This your girl CC with WIB Magazine, and I have my co-host on the line. I have Mickey Monday on the line. How are you?
I'm doing good, CC. How are you?
I'm doing good. We have a special guest on the line. I'm gonna let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nefertiti Austin, and I wrote a memoir called Motherhood So White, a memoir of race, gender, and parenting in America. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on today. But tell everybody, how did you become an author, or what made you want to be an author?
I have been writing my whole life, and when I was a kid, my dad used to write revolutionary poetry, and he'd hand my brother and I a yellow tablet and a pencil, and I would be trying to do what he was doing. And so that love of writing was fostered very early for me. And when we went to live with our grandparents, even before we went to live with them, we'd go visit. My grandfather was a voracious reader, always reading. He'd be reading multiple books at a time. So that was something I saw that, and so I kind of put it together that, you know, you read and you write. And for anyone who writes or wants to write, writers do two things, and that is we read and we write.
Okay. And you had that book, the book called Motherhood Is So White. How did you come up with that title?
I wrote an article years ago called Adoption So White because the adoption space is very white. It's very geared towards white parents who are adopting children of color. And so it's really a play on Oscar's So White. And when it was time to come up with a title for my memoir, actually it was my editor, incidentally, who was a white woman, who came up with, well, let's try Motherhood So White. So it's really close to an article you had written, and it speaks to the heart of my book, which is that in parenting spaces and motherhood spaces, typically the focus, all of the attention goes to white women. So it's like mother equals white in this country. And so that's pretty much how the title, that part of the title came about.
Okay. Well, I know I read that book, and it was a great book. It was very inspirational too. Very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
So, I see you have the Motherhood So White, and then you also did the editorial piece. Do you have any other bodies of work that you're working on currently, or?
I have written a children's book for children who, it's for kids who are in adoption, in foster care, but it's about kids in foster care, because I think there might be one book out. And if you live in a city, you know, especially in public schools, so many children are in foster care. And so I wanted to give them something to be proud of. And then also for the kids that they are in school with, have an understanding that, you know, kids are going through things. You don't always know what they're going through. And maybe that child comes to school dirty because, you know, he or she has been moved yet again and they don't have enough clothing, or maybe that child seems angry and they're angry really because they miss their family. You never know what's going on. So just to kind of create compassion and empathy for children who are in out-of-home care. And I wrote 2 romance novels many, many years ago. I don't even know if they're still in print, but I did have some books published a long time ago. And the last 10 years, mostly I have been writing nonfiction, writing about race, writing about gender, parenting, and adoption.
Okay. Yeah, and I was kind of going through your IG, your Instagram, and just kind of perusing, looking at some of the posts, and they are very, very racially charged, and also call to actions. Yes. And kind of invoking positivity through those actions as well. So yeah, that's definitely, like Cece said, it's definitely inspirational. Your work, whatever you do in your work, is definitely inspirational.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So what I want to say, I want to ask you, like, what is your work schedule like when you are writing, these editorial pieces and things like that? Like, how does your life balance out?
Balance? What's that? That's a joke. Okay, so like right now I'm supposed to be submitting a pitch. I was supposed to have done that yesterday. I haven't done it, but I will do it today. So I will think through. A lot of the writing process for me is just thinking. I might think for a few weeks before I actually start writing anything. So I've been thinking about writing an article about how other children can be empathetic to children who don't have maybe Wi-Fi in their home, or their school's curriculum isn't as robust as theirs is. My children are in private school, but I remind them all the time that it's just a coincidence that we are able to do what we're able to do. And I never want them to take that for granted. And so, I've been thinking about like empathy and being grateful and grace a lot. And so I wasn't sure, kind of where the thoughts would go, but that's where I think the home that they will take. And it depends. If I'm on a deadline, then I'm very disciplined and I will sit and work on it, maybe a little bit each day up until the deadline. It's a little tricky, especially on the shutdown with the kids in the house, because I'm used to really writing alone while they are at school. And so sometimes I just go in my room and I lock the door and I advise them, do not bother me unless the house is on fire or you are bleeding, so that I can finish doing it. Because I'm like, you like to eat, right? So leave me alone, please.
My goodness, yeah. Wow, you're right. That is crazy. What life? I get it. I get it. So just kind of drawing back and looking at the year as a whole, there were some events that you had lined up that were canceled, and one of those events were the LA Times Book Festival, right?
Yes.
So have you I mean, I'm sure you've done plenty of events before, but can you kind of list some of the highlights of those events that you've attended and some of the things that you've accomplished?
Well, that one, okay, LA Times Book Festival, of course, was canceled. And so they've rescheduled it, I think, virtually for October. And then I think they're kind of splitting it in half. And then the next group will be in person, hopefully, next spring. And I did a lot of traveling last fall when my book came out. And that was really nice to go to places I've never been before, like Cleveland and Denver, and talk to other writers and talk to librarians and talk to just other readers, in the audience about my work and my passion around just Black motherhood and Black children in the foster care system. And then when the shutdown happened, everything really switched to more of a virtual audience. And so it's nice to be able to talk to Black audiences, because the majority of my audiences in white spaces, which is important because prior to Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, it was kind of like a little here, a little there. And then the empathy meter went up and people were like, oh, well, we should learn about Black motherhood, and we should know about talking to children about race, because Black people do it unconsciously, like we're always talking about it. And so there's been so many white spaces that I've been part of, and more recently Black spaces. So that's it's cool. I'm open to whatever, and we'll see what else comes down the pipeline as far as events.
Okay. Wonderful.
Yeah. So who are some of your favorite authors?
I think I have too many to list. So let's see. Today, I would say the co-writer, Dapper Dan, out, and I just read that the other week. So whoever co-wrote that with him. So I think that is an excellent writer. I'm not much into sci-fi, but I did really enjoy Children of Blood and Bone. So that's Tommy BMA. And which was surprising because that's not necessarily the genre that I gravitate to. And I'm looking forward to reading Compton Cowboys, and I think that came out a few months ago. So my favorite, and I guess I should back up a little bit to your first question, writing. I knew I wanted to be a writer when I read Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin, and that was at 13. So I had I want to be a lawyer and I want to be a writer. And obviously writing overtook becoming a lawyer, but so, you know, James Baldwin, of course, remains very high on my list.
Okay. So what advice can you give others that want to be a writer? Because I want to be a writer, so I would love to know, like, you know, the advice or how to get into writing. Because I do write poetry and I have been writing little stories.
Okay.
But what advice would you give to someone that want to be an upcoming writer?
Well, the first thing you have to do is write. So, I mean, I do talk to a lot of people, and there's a lot of fear around writing because people feel, oh my God, if it's not perfect, the first draft, then it's terrible. So be prepared for a very long, drawn out process. Read the writers whom you admire. And if there's a particular style that you want to emulate, then you should emulate the style. I mean, you know, mysteries, crime, romance, sci-fi, those things, those genres are the same. It's just it's your perspective on it. And so you don't have to feel like, oh, someone's written a poem about traffic in Atlanta, so I can't do that. You can do, of course, whatever you want. And I would also advise you, now I'm self-taught, but you know, there are many ways to approach it. You can join writers groups, and the way you will know that you are in a good writers group is if you get constructive criticism. It can't be everyone sitting around high-fiving each other like, oh yeah, that's good, that's great, because that's not going to help you grow. So you really want to have at least one person in the group who has had publication, some type of success, because then they can give you advice on how to get to where they are versus, you know, your friends saying, oh my God, this is the best thing ever, because it might not be. So I would say be patient with yourself, be prepared to write lots and lots of drafts of whatever it is you're working on. And if there are some collective spaces that you can participate in to get your work out there, you should read. People have resources and they can say, oh, there's a competition coming up, you know, you should submit to this. So Poets and Writers magazine is an excellent resource. They have so many opportunities, and they give you a list of upcoming writers workshops. And a bunch of them are on the East Coast, and in the South, you guys have way more than we do on the West Coast. So I would highly suggest you get Poets and Writers and start there.
Okay. And thank you.
Wow. So what would you say is your interesting writing quirk?
Interesting writing quirk. I think I have learned just to let it all go on the page, and then I go back and clean up. So I have a friend that I write with from time to time, and so I had to tell her the way I write. And so she's like, no, you've got too many words. Okay, well, you have to do this. And I'm like, I know. I just need to get it out of me. So I've given myself the freedom pretty much to kind of vomit it onto the page. And I put a lot of X's in capital letters if I don't know which word, or I write a lot of notes to myself within paragraphs. And it might be, you need an emotion here, or it might be, how does this doesn't make any sense. And I think, and because I throw it all at the wall, you know, sometimes it's garbage, but sometimes there's some real gems in there that I keep. I just might have to kind of move it around later. So that's probably, I think the quirkiest thing is just that it's gibberish, but I throw it all out there.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's good advice for anybody that's listening to or watching, excuse me. Because, you know, that way they wouldn't be discouraged to, you know, just to say what they feel. And then at that point, I mean, that's what editors are for anyway. Before you publish a book, you have to have someone. Yeah, exactly.
And I think also, I mean, most writers tend to be pretty emotional, very emotional on the page, maybe not in real life. But I notice that in my writing, often it depends on the topic, but usually it's coming from a very emotional space. So I really had to learn to be comfortable letting all of that out, and then go back and strip out the emotion, because sometimes it's too much. And because less is more, when you're writing. So just because something is 500 or 600 pages doesn't make it any better than something that's, 225 pages.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So aside from what Cece said earlier, what's some positive feedback that you received from readers or the librarians or other authors that have experienced reading your books?
I got a really great note on Instagram the other day, and it was a woman who adopted a little girl who's now 7, and she was like, wow, reading your book, I had so many of the same experiences, and she's like, I would have loved to have read this like at the beginning of my journey. So that made me feel good, because I wrote this book for myself because it was the book that wasn't available when I got started. And I wrote it for Black women and Black families who are interested in adopting and have thought about it and, maybe need a little push. And I wrote it for white women so that they see that there are a lot of universal aspects of motherhood, but that culturally we are different, and that they need to acknowledge our differences and support those differences. And so I had a call actually this morning. It was 2 white women, and they both have read the book, and both of them said, oh, in reading your book, I realized there's so much I don't know. And then I thought to myself, well, why don't I know this? So I like the people who are checking themselves, like, okay, I have some blind spots around reading about diverse motherhood, and what is that about? So that's been really good.
That's awesome. Well, I know you keep yourself busy, but when you do have spare time, what do you do in your spare time when you have spare time?
I binge watch television. So I have been able to read since the pandemic hit, which has been great because I don't always have time to read. So that's been nice. I've done way more reading, and I find a show and I'll just pick anything and I'll just sit and watch it. And my daughter will be like, are you still watching that? I'm like, yeah, but now I'm in season 3. So yeah, I got to watch it all the way. And I know I got to watch it all the way to the end. I need to know what's going to happen. So that's what I do.
Okay. So what's one of your favorite TV shows then? And you say you're on season 3.
Yes. Well, I just finished this show called Marcella on Netflix. This woman's a detective and she's crazy. So I enjoyed that. And I'm missing Claws. I hope they're able to film, I think, the 4th season. So I'm looking forward to that. And I wish I had Stars because Power Book 2 started, I think, a week ago. So I'm going to have to go to somebody's house so I can, do this. I don't care. The Greek's going to be able to carry it forward. I don't know. I need to know.
And it has been good so far. I've seen last week's and Sundays for Power 2, and I like it. I'm a Miss Ghost, but I like it.
Okay. All right. I got to watch it.
But do you think of turning your book into a movie?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that would be great. I don't know that I need to write it. Film writing is different from writing a book. So I am learning how to write for television. Okay. And so, we'll see. I'm open to it.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you the one question that has just been sitting on my mind. And I feel like it's a very typical question, but I just want to know your process. Like when you have writer's block,
okay,
what do you do to overcome it? Like, what steps do you take? How do you get yourself out of that?
Okay.
That
yeah.
How do you get yourself out of that period, I guess?
So I like to say that procrastination is preparation. So if I have a block or I'm procrastinating, then I will clean up, but like it's above and beyond my regular cleaning. So suddenly I notice stuff like the baseboards. I'm like, oh, I should clean that. Or I go for a walk. And if I have some thoughts, again, I throw it on the page. It doesn't have to make sense. And I just let it sit. Because sometimes what you need, the work will give you what it needs, and you can't force it. And there's nothing wrong with having writer's block. It's not a bad thing. It might be sort of your spirit kind of working out whatever that character needs or whatever that scene needs. And it might be a week or two before I'm able to go back to maybe a particular section or even to what I'm working on. And I really just give myself permission to, it's not coming. I don't feel it, because writing is so emotional. I have to feel like I'm emotionally in the right space to write. And so if I'm stuck on one thing, maybe I'll jump to something else, because when I let it go, then what I need will show up. And the other thing, again, read who you like. I might, pick up a book totally unrelated to what I'm working on. And because I'm not attached to it, then the answer might come for me.
Okay. Wow. And it's funny you mentioned that earlier. You said something about like cleaning.
Yes.
And just finding things to clean. I think you posted something on Instagram about that too, about having a writer live with you. Like that's the one thing you can guarantee that they'll always be cleaning if they're not writing.
I'm trying to tell you, always cleaning, and which of course makes it a nightmare for my son who's on dishes, because I'm always like, dude, you missed that. You don't see this on? And he's like, Mom, I cleaned it. No, you didn't. You don't see this right here? So I'm not like a neat freak, but I do have a little OCD, and it's time to write now. That's what I was doing earlier before the call, and I was like, oh, I guess I should dust.
Just a little bit, yeah. Okay. No problem. So, honestly, one of the things that have happened this year that didn't get a lot of publicity was that NASA recently discovered a parallel universe to ours.
Right? Oh, nice.
So in this parallel universe, because in this parallel universe, you wouldn't be a writer. What would you be doing instead of writing if writing wasn't your calling, right? What could you see yourself doing other than that? Like,
what could I see myself doing? I think I would have been a therapist.
Okay.
Yeah, if there were parallel universe, I think I would have become, maybe not a psychiatrist, but I think I may have become a therapist.
Okay.
I think I'm a good listener, so.
Gotcha. So out of the adoption process, what has been the hardest part of going through that?
I think with my son, the hardest part was it was stretched out way longer. Like his adoption should have been a slam dunk. He was legally freed, which meant that the parental rights had been terminated, and we should have just, popped on through his whole journey. But it got extended because it was a really big case and there were so many social workers involved and people dropped the ball along the way. So that was the hardest thing, just really remembering to be patient. And for anyone who's gone through the process, I mean, you have to educate yourself, you have to be organized, and you have to be in a position to advocate for yourself. And that was stuff I didn't necessarily expect, because the first social worker was all over it. She was super on top of things. And so it was disappointing at times to meet a new person and to have to start all over with, okay, this is the day he came and this is what has happened thus far and this is what we need. And so that kind of stuff was irritating, to say the very least. But other than that, it went pretty well. In California, we, just like in other states, of course, you take your classes and you wait to be matched with a child. So that part of it went pretty quickly.
Okay. Wow. You had any other questions, Mickey Monday?
I'm thinking of some more. I really am, because I mean, all the questions that I've asked, you've, been spot on with them. You just have been able to, give me very, very well answered questions. I mean, it's almost as if someone gave you these questions before you got on, which is I guess I have another question. So, I'm gonna try and throw a hard one at you. So,
okay.
Well, while you thinking about that one, then I'll just ask this. I always like to ask all our guests, what is one fun fact about yourself?
I like candy.
Okay. What's your favorite candy?
Depends. Sometimes it's lemon heads.
Oh.
Sometimes it's C's candy. It just, depends on day of the week. But I do, I like junk food. I like candy.
Well, that would keep you energized. That candy.
Like it. I just like the sugar.
Gotcha.
So my question was going to be, have you ever considered going on like some sort of like literary pilgrimage? Wow. Have you ever considered going on like a literary pilgrimage or something where you kind of like take a retreat, or have you done that before in your career, or is that something that you may consider doing, just to kind of like kind of take in everything and help with your writing process?
Right. Well, in '04, I did do like this crazy summer. I went back to back. I went to a bread loaf writers conference, and I went to Vona in San Francisco and Santa Fe Writers Conference in Taos, New Mexico. So that was fun. And because I was self-taught, I was published at that point, and I went, as a writer, there's always room for improvement. And so I was really happy I went, and I've got some literary BFFs. We're still friends today. And so I do go to AWP, which is Associated Writers Program, and it's offered every year. And in fact, I'm on a panel for next year. It'll be in Kansas City, but I think it's going to be virtual. And so every few years I will go to writers' conferences if I can. I haven't had a chance to take advantage of like writers' colonies where I could be gone for a week or two, because I'm a single parent and my kids are still, my eldest is 13, youngest is 7. So, clearly they can do without me for 5 or 6 days, but I don't want to leave them for 2 weeks. Before I know it, they'll be off in the world, and then I can go and do that. So, it's okay. I signed up to be a parent, and I just have to juggle accordingly.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
But in Poets and Writers, you will find like all of those writers' retreats and colonies, and some you have to apply to get in, and then others you just pay and then you go.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look into that.
I was just about to say that.
Well, what has been one of your biggest accomplishments you have so far?
Well, I was on the Today Show last year, which was huge, and I never would have thought that I would be on, national news program. So that was fun. And I think the other big accomplishment, I think seeing this book reach publication, because like I said, I've been writing about race and gender and parenting and stuff for about 10 years. And there was a period where I was rejected by almost 60 agents who said, oh, this is great. It's such an important topic, but it's a marginal topic. So I was being told like consistently that Black motherhood was marginal. And I know why, it's just all about race and racism. And so I didn't know, I thought it was a good story. I felt it was important. And that's why I didn't give up. And I continued to query agents, and finally meeting the right agent who was like, oh, heck yeah, we can get this published. And then her being able to sell it, which was great. So I think that's a really big accomplishment, given that Black women, Black mothers in particular, are at the bottom of the mother, the racialized totem pole. And so there are a few more books out now about Black motherhood written by, I don't know, 12, 13. Mm-hmm. It's almost 2021, and that's it. There's some from like the 80s maybe, but in terms of a pure focus on family and motherhood, and then in my case, adoption, it's not out there, which is ridiculous. So I feel really good about, I guess, birthing that particular baby, because I wasn't sure that it was going to happen.
Okay, and congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Well, we have some trivia questions for you before we get off.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna start with mine. Mine is, if you could interview anybody in the world, who would you interview and what would their question be?
Okay, can I pass? I don't know, because okay, I will come up with an answer, but let me go to the next question. I'll come back to that one.
Okay, I can ask you a different one.
That's
September
okay.
is my birthday. I ask everybody, what's one exciting thing that you want to do for the month of September, and what is one thing that you plan on accomplishment in the month of September?
So what would be super exciting, what will be super exciting is when my daughter goes to school all day long.
Okay.
And what I hope to accomplish is I am trying to get a lit manager, because like I was saying earlier, I want to learn how to write for television. So that would be a huge accomplishment to get representation in the entertainment industry.
Okay.
Wow. Okay. Did you still want to answer that other question, or did you want to just?
Well, I'm still trying to think of like, okay, if there's one person in the world, okay, in the whole world, you know, who would I want to interview?
We can skip it. You answer one for me.
Okay.
Just making sure.
What's
So,
yours, Mickey Monday?
yeah, so I have a trivia question for you. If you could invite 3 people to dinner, whether they're living, dead, fictional, you know, real, whatever the case may be, who would they be?
That's a really good question. I would invite Harriet Tubman to dinner because I'd be curious to know. I mean, I'm a historian, so I know what she did and I know why she did it, but I would want to know, what did it take to do what she did? Like, what about her thought process made her feel like, I suffer from dizzy spells and, you know, epilepsy, and I'm illiterate and I'm barely 5 feet tall, but I am out. Like, I will not be a slave. I would love to sit and talk with her just to know about her spirit. You know, I'd love for that to rub off and to be so unafraid. So she's definitely one person. There's a South African writer named J.M. Coetzee, and he won a Pulitzer for literature. I think the same time Toni Morrison did, or maybe the year before, somewhere in there. And he, like the works that I'm most familiar with, like Waiting for the Barbarians and Disgrace, he managed to write about apartheid without necessarily naming it. And so, such an amazing writer, and I again love to know his process and his thoughts on, why did you not name it, and, you know, did you see power in not naming it? But it was very clear, you know, what the books are about. And let me think, who else would be the third person? I think those are kind of like the main two. And maybe, I know this is more than one person. I think if I could bring my grandparents back, like I have one grandparent still alive. She just turned 101. And it would be nice just to get a little bit more family history from them. I have some, you know, I probably have a lot, but I have some more questions for them. So to your question, I knew it would come to me. Who would I interview? It would be, you know, my grandparents, just to ask them just a few more questions.
Okay. Okay.
Wow.
Well, I want to say, oh, go ahead, Mickey Monday.
Yeah, I was going to say, you said your grandmother, she turned 101.
My dad's mom. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is a wonderful milestone. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I want to say congrats on your journey. Congrats on everything. I enjoyed your book. And thanks for interviewing with us today. We had a good time.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, and before we get off, where can everybody follow you?
Oh, you can follow me on Instagram at I am Nefertiti Austin. You can follow me on Twitter at Nefertiti Austin, or Facebook, same at Nefertiti Austin. I do have a website, you guessed it, nefertitiaustin.com.
And there you
And
have
as you
it.
guys know, I do respond to, if you write to me, I will respond. So.
Okay.
Perfect.
Nick, you
Well,
had anything? Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I do. I'm disappointed just a little bit because I'm waiting for that, the fatherhood book to come out. So, because of the motherhood there is.
Yes.
So if the guys can get something too, that would be awesome. But aside from that, what were you gonna say?
No, I was saying you're right.
Oh yeah, yeah. Just whatever you decide to do it. No rush. But no, seriously, thank you for being a part of this experience. You are a very strong, eloquently poised woman who, is just, I can see why you're a writer. Everything you say is it just comes out of you. Like you said, every question I've asked you, you had an answer for it. Even when I had to think of a question, you were like right there. So
well, I had to think about a couple of, questions.
Well, it was so smooth though.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Well, you have a happy Tuesday. Be blessed and be safe.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great one.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Be safe.
Boy, what you know? Rufus boy, let me love boy, what you know?